What is going on, investors? Hopefully you guys had a great day out there. Time to talk about Adobe. Ticker symbol ADBE. They just reported their earnings after the bell today. We're going to jump into those. Now, hey, if you like what we're doing here on the channel, if you like this video, please consider hitting that like button and maybe leaving me a comment as well. These company-specific videos don't typically reach the wide audience that some of my other videos do, so I'd appreciate your support on this one. So we're going to talk about Adobe. They had a beat, just the classic beat and raise here by Adobe, but you're seeing in the after hours, shares are basically flat after being up about 1 3/4% during the regular session. Now, year to date, this stock is actually down about 11. And when we jump over to the stock chart towards the end of the video, we'll talk about maybe that technically it's kind of hitting its head on a resistance point, could create a buying opportunity, quite frankly, because when we jump into the financials on this one, I tell you what, if you're new to financials, reading financial documents, if it's something that you haven't gotten a lot of experience about, I tell you what, Adobe's one of the cleanest companies that you can first begin your journey towards that. So I'm going to walk you through these right now. We've got our 3 months ended here, February here into March. So this is the most recent quarter. This is the previous quarter here. We've got our subscription revenue. This is Adobe Creative Cloud and things of that nature. They're pretty much a subscription software service business these days. It used to be a little bit different. You used to buy a license to the software. Now you just buy a subscription to the software. We see our total revenue coming in the previous period. It was $3 billion. All the way up to $3.9 billion. Now, they did give guidance for the full year of 2021. So this is our fiscal year guidance here. They're coming in at $15 billion. And so that's about this run rate that we're at now, because you can times this number by 4 and you're getting pretty darn close to this $15.45 billion. So it could be that investors are kind of digesting maybe a slightly slower growth to the company's top line. Now, what's fantastic about this company, reminds me a lot about Microsoft, is the cost of revenue, the gross margins on this business are some of the best you'll ever seen. It's atypical, but it's similar to maybe like a Google or a Microsoft. Take a look. We spent, let's just come down here. Total cost, this is total cost of our revenue right here. We made $3.9 billion. This is billions of dollars. And we spent, I want to say, only $447 million. Even if these numbers were as written, you spent $447 to make $3,905. Boy, you are balling. That is a great business, let alone these are in millions of dollars. That gives us a gross profit down here at $3.5 billion. Unbelievable that you have $3.9 billion in revenue and almost all of it. I mean, all but just a fraction of it flows down to the gross profit line. Now, again, that's not the full story here. We got R&D, sales and marketing, general administrative, got some amortization as well, but it's a relatively small numbers. Total operating expenses coming in here at $2 billion, up slightly from the previous period. I think you'd expect that, as you know, they got to drive some sales. It looked like sales and marketing ticked up kind of nicely in the quarter because they got to do that to drive these sales up here. They got to advertise and things of that nature and have staff and back office to support all that. That gives us operating income of $1.4 billion. So I talked about our gross profit here, $3.5 billion. Our almost all but $2 billion flows down to this operating side. So $1.45 billion. And we were right at about rounded up to about $1 billion in the previous period. Just absolutely phenomenal. And most of it flows, a lot of it flows down here to the net income when you factor in taxes and things of that nature. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about that here when we get to the cash flow statements, but let's take a look at the balance sheet. So this is the balance sheet over at Adobe. It's absolutely crystal clean, because take a look, we've got some cash and cash equivalents here. This is going back from November to March. So what's that, about 6 months or so? Well, everything on the total current asset side, basically even. We went down just slightly. It looks like they used some cash. They might be doing a buyback. We'll take a look at that on the cash flow side, but total assets basically flat. We were at 24.3 and we're basically at 25 now. From the liability side, they've got a little bit of debt here. So they've got about 4.119. They haven't really really paid a whole lot of that off. In fact, it raised up a little bit over the last 6 months or so, but total liabilities basically flat, up only about $400 million. All things being considered, that's a pretty nice balance sheet. Now, from a cash flow perspective, so here's our cash flows. We pull down that net income number, which was $1.2 billion. It was $955 in the previous quarter. They don't really do a lot of adjustments here. Okay, we've got, this is just a really clean company. There's not like a lot of depreciation and things like that where you're really factoring that in. I mean, it's here, but it's not very much money. We've got a little bit of stock-based compensation as well. We see here net cash provided by the operating activities coming in at $1.7 billion. That is really close to $1.2 billion. Okay, so you can really analyze this company however you want to, because there's not a lot of adjustments to be made here. Now, what I did want to come down here is to come down to financing activity, see what they're, we did see here up in the balance sheet that they are using a little bit of cash. In fact, they went through about $1 billion and short-term investments stayed the same. So this is short-term investments. This is basically cash, might be like treasuries or they, tied up in some kind of bond. This is cash and cash equivalents. It's also it's sometimes treasuries and sometimes just cash sitting in a bank account. That went down by $1 billion. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to come down here. I see repurchase of common stock, and it's coming in right at about $1 billion. So that's what they use, in my opinion, that's basically what they use the cash for. Now, they also use some cash in the investing activities. Okay, well, it looks like we've got some acquisitions that they made. They actually made a nice little acquisition in the quarter at about $1.4 billion. One of those typically closed in that quarter. So that's where some of the cash burned out from. So that's what you like to see, honestly. Repurchase common stock, you like that. You like acquisitions as well. That typically helps the balance sheet as well. Now, from a valuation perspective, you know that I don't get tied up into a lot of traditional valuation metrics, because I tell you what, Wall Street doesn't really care sometimes, and in this case, it could be true, but I do have a price to sales of Adobe here because we are going to talk about, because the financials are so good, the guidance came in kind of nice, everything's looking really good for this company. Technically, it could be reading a buy as well, so we'll talk about maybe this is a time we want to buy Adobe, so that's when I do bring up some traditional valuation metrics, and in this case, price to sales sitting at about 17 times. We see it's been as high as about 21 times, so it has retraced, but more typically this company is in that 14 to 16 range, and we're sitting right at 16, so it's not undervalued from a historical price to sales basis, but it is not as overvalued as it potentially was in the past. So I do kind of like Adobe at that level. Now let's take a look at the stock chart. This thing was in a defined downtrend, like a lot of stocks. It made kind of a top here, and then just interest rates started going wild and everybody just started selling, and man, this thing went off, and now we're in kind of a reversal. You could almost look at this as this is reversed. Okay, we're kind of in this uptrend. Now we're up above it. Now technically we've kind of hit our head on 460. You see, 460 was support here. It was support here. It was support all along here. I mean, this is where buyers stepped in for like almost like half a month, like 2 weeks here at this level. 460, again, we could probably zoom this chart out. 460 is an area where buyers step in with Adobe, but it is also going to be resistance on the way back up. We see this candle came all the way up to 465, 466, and came back down right at 460. So we're at a critical level with Adobe. I tell you what, we're in this shorter term uptrend. We pull back into the 450s, 455, somewhere in there. I think you could come in here and nibble on this one. Okay, is it a perfect area? Is it an area where this thing could reverse trend and come back down here and retest these lows in the 420s? Absolutely. But if this shorter term uptrend holds, this 460 level, we break above it. What you'd like to see is a nice green candle above this, and then we're up into these zones up in here, probably 475, 485, and eventually retesting 500. If you're in this one for shorter term, I know some people watch this and you might be, you're looking to only be in something for a few months or for 12 months or something like that. As this approaches 500, you can see here, sellers stepped in at 500 here, 500, 500, 500. So as this stock gets closer to 500, it is less of a buy as it's down here at 460. I actually think this one sets up pretty nice. You can buy this one in the 460 area. You could put a stop loss down here at 440, 439, 438, somewhere in there, and play this one all the way back up to 500. So that's what I'm seeing here. But personally, as you guys know, I'm a buy and hold investor. These financials and the way these read are fantastic, and I would buy and hold this company for the long term. They are executing a buyback. They have tremendous guidance. This is a company that just churns out positive cash flow, and I think it can be a part of anybody's portfolio. So that was Adobe. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. We'll be back again very soon with more videos. Good luck with your investments.